Imagine being the sitting president of the United States, only to have your biggest night completely hijacked by the man you thought you'd buried politically. That's exactly what unfolded when Donald Trump tried to push Barack Obama out of a Washington gala, only for Obama to take control of the room in a way no one predicted. The ballroom glowed beneath massive chandeliers, their golden light shimmering across polished tables as waiters slipped between donors carrying silver trays. This wasn't just another DC dinner. It was the annual gala for the American Housing Relief Foundation at the Marriott Marquis, a high-profile blend of politicians, CEOs, activists, and Hollywood guests. But everything changed the moment the announcer's voice boomed across the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former President of the United States, Barack Obama. It was like someone flipped a switch. The entire room launched to its feet in a roar of applause, cheers echoing off the marble walls. Phones shot into the air. Guests leaned over tables for a better look as Obama walked in, calm and composed, hand raised in that familiar effortless wave. But at the head table, President Donald Trump wasn't clapping. His shoulders were stiff. His lips were pressed into a thin, flat line that he had been the night's headliner. Until now, he wasn't even supposed to be here, Trump muttered, just loud enough for his security chief, Mark Delaney, to hear. Delaney leaned in, eyes fixed on the crowd. Sir, the board invited him last minute. Strictly for visibility. Trump scoffed under his breath. Visibility, huh? He's not stealing my spotlight. Not tonight. But the room wasn't paying attention to him. They were too busy lining up to shake Obama's hand. A senator from Arizona nudged her colleague, whispering, "Look at this, he still owns the room." And she was right. Obama had completely flipped the night's energy without saying a single word. Trump watched, jaw tight, as Obama moved through the crowd. Warm handshakes, small conversations, a calm smile that reached everyone it landed on. He drifted effortlessly between donors and volunteers, connecting with ease. That's what people loved about him. He made the room feel seen. One table over, a businessman whispered, "That's the difference. He makes it about them, not him." His wife nodded, eyes locked on Obama. Flashes burst from cameras. Reporters scribbled frantically. Something bigger than a simple appearance was brewing. They could all feel it, and then, without warning, the applause faded. People began sitting again, though their attention never wavered. The entire ballroom quieted, every gaze drifting back toward the head table. Trump sat unmoving. Obama hadn't spoken a word, yet the night already felt different. One question hung in the air: how would Trump react to being overshadowed in his own spotlight? What happened next made the tension snap even tighter. Trump leaned back in his chair, shoulders rigid. "Mark," he said quietly. "Get him out of here." Delaney froze. "Sir. You heard me. I don't want him stealing the show. Tell him this isn't his event." Delaney hesitated, something he rarely did. "With respect, Mr. President," removing him in front of this crowd. Trump cut him off with a sharp snap of his fingers. "Do it quietly. I don't care how. Just make it happen." At a nearby table, Senator Julia Reinhart caught enough of the exchange to stiffen. She leaned toward Republican donor Charles Vinton. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Charles swallowed, eyes flicking between Trump and Obama. "This is about to get messy," he murmured. Delaney signaled 2 guards. They started moving through the tightly packed tables, their dark suits cutting through the crowd. People barely noticed, except Obama. He paused mid-handshake as the guards approached, raising an eyebrow with a calm, almost amused expression. He adjusted his cuff, glanced at them, and offered a soft, steady greeting. "Evening, gentlemen," Obama said with that unmistakable half-smile. The entire room was about to find out what happens when 2 presidents collide, one with power, the other with presence. His voice carried just enough weight to quiet the guests closest to him. "Everything all right?" Obama asked gently. The taller guard cleared his throat. "Mr. President, we've been instructed to escort you out." The words hit the room like a wine glass shattering on marble. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. A ripple of disbelief swept from table to table. Obama didn't budge. He studied the guard's face, calm as stone, then let his gaze shift to the head table, straight to Trump. Trump stared back, jaw set, eyes unblinking. He was waiting. Waiting for the moment his rival would be forced to walk out under the authority of his security team. but before the scene could explode, Linda Ortega, the evening's host and director of the American Housing Relief Foundation, shot to her feet and grabbed the microphone. Her hands trembled at first, but her voice steadied with resolve. "Excuse me," she said, glancing between Obama and Trump. "Mr. Obama is our guest. He was invited by the board this morning. I personally asked him to attend." A wave of murmurs spread across the room. Eyebrows rose. Chairs shifted. Obama gave a small appreciative nod her way, then turned back to the guards. "Sounds like I'm right where I'm supposed to be," he said smoothly. "No need for an escort, unless you gentlemen just need to stretch your legs." A few tables broke into nervous laughter. Then more joined in. Soon the room was chuckling, the tension bending but not quite breaking. The guards exchanged uncertain looks, then, slam! Trump's hand smacked the table so hard the silverware rattled. "This is my event," he barked, voice slicing through the ballroom. "I'm the President of the United States, and I'm telling you, get him out." Silence. Even the servers froze, trays suspended in mid-air. For the first time all night, it wasn't Obama commanding attention. It was Trump's fury sucking the oxygen out of the room. Obama remained still, centered, untouched. He turned to Linda Ortega, his tone gentle. "Linda, it's your call. Do you want me here? Or would you prefer I step out?" Her answer came instantly. "We would be honored if you said a few words." The ballroom erupted, this time not just supportive, but defiant, stronger, louder, unmistakably pointed. Several guests stood, applauding with such force their palms turned red. Trump's face flushed a deep, burning red. Obama stepped forward, offering a polite nod to the guard still hovering nearby. "Looks like we've got clarity," he said softly. "Appreciate your professionalism, gentlemen." The guard stepped back, relieved to be out of the crossfire. Obama glanced toward Trump, their eyes locked. The contrast was blinding. One man calm, measured, in full control of himself, the other shaking with anger, fists curling, face flushed with frustration. Obama turned to the crowd, raising his hands just slightly, the familiar gesture he always used right before speaking. "Friends," he began, voice steady and full, "this night isn't about me. It's not about politics. It's about families across this country who need a roof over their heads." The room softened instantly, people leaned in. He hadn't even started his message, but he already had them. Yet the real turning point was still ahead, because what he said next would flip the night entirely. The applause after Linda Ortega's statement was more than gratitude, it was a visible rejection of Trump's command. A line drawn in real time. People weren't just clapping for Obama. They were clapping against what they had just witnessed. Obama kept his posture composed, though he understood the stakes clearly. This wasn't just a feel-good speech at a fundraiser, this was a live broadcast moment. A test, and somewhere in the room, every camera lens had tightened its focus. If he stumbled even once, Trump would seize the moment. Linda still held the microphone like it was the only solid thing in the room. She glanced from Trump's scowl to Obama's calm expression. "Mr. President, would you honor us with a few words?" Instant silence, forks clinked back onto plates, the band stopped mid-melody. Conversations died instantly. Trump muttered loudly enough for half the front tables to hear, "Oh, for God's sake, she's begging him like he's a rock star." At his table, Ivanka leaned in. Ivanka leaned closer, whispering urgently, "Dad, just let him speak. The cameras are everywhere. If you push this any further, it'll blow up in your face." Trump snapped back, bristling, "I am the cameras. They're here for me." But the truth hung in the air like smoke. They weren't anymore. Obama paused for a brief heartbeat, not rushing toward the podium. Instead, he walked slowly, purposefully, shaking a few hands as he moved. Each step drew the moment out, stretching the tension tighter and tighter. Guests leaned forward, afraid to miss a single second. When he finally reached the stage, Obama placed one hand on the wooden podium. He scanned the packed ballroom, then simply waited, letting the room settle itself, letting the silence become his. No fidgeting, no rush, no nerves, just presence. Only when the murmurs faded and every eye was locked on him did he offer a small, warm smile, almost self-teasing. "I wasn't planning on speaking tonight," he began, voice calm and even. "I came here to support an incredible cause. But since I've been handed the mic," he paused, inviting a soft wave of laughter, "I'll say just a few words." At the head table, Trump's fists tightened. He leaned toward Mark Delaney and hissed through his teeth, "I told you this would happen. He's taking over the whole night. But around him, guests were leaning forward, engaged. Obama's voice wasn't dramatic, it was intimate, conversational, like he was speaking to each person alone. This night isn't about me, he continued softly, it isn't about politics. It's not even about any history between people in this room. He let the words breathe. It's about families, families in Cleveland, in Phoenix, in Tulsa, who don't know if they'll have a roof over their heads next week. The room stilled. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so people had to listen harder. It's about a mother who has to explain to her kids why they're sleeping in a car. It's about a veteran who served this country and came home without a home. It's about children carrying homework in plastic bags because they don't have a safe place to study. The ballroom was silent except for soft camera clicks and pens sliding across paper. Obama's words painted vivid pictures, painfully real ones, and everyone in the room saw them. Linda Ortega stood near the stage, hands clasped, relief flooding her face. She had feared the night would implode under political tension, but now it was rebuilding itself, stronger. Obama straightened. I've been blessed in my life, he said gently. I've had opportunities many others haven't, and because of that, I feel a responsibility to give back. He paused, then delivered the line that detonated the room. So tonight, I'll be making a personal donation of $1 million to the American Housing Relief Foundation. Gasps, then an explosion of applause. Chairs scraped as people surged to their feet, some cheered, some whistled, even the quiet donors clapped hard. At Trump's table, the mood thickened. He stared ahead, jaw rigid, refusing to applaud. Ivanka leaned in again, whispering frantically, Dad, people are watching. Just clap. At least pretend. Trump's hand twitched, but he stayed stone still. Cameras captured everything. On stage, Obama lifted his hands to calm the crowd. But let's be clear, he said, this isn't about one donation. I challenge every person in this room, no matter your politics, to give what you can tonight, because this cause belongs to all of us. The applause roared back, louder, determined. Donors leaned toward staff, whispering increased pledges. Phones lit up with new commitments. A routine fundraiser was turning into something historic, right before their eyes. Trump didn't move. In minutes, the spotlight he claimed had been taken from him, but the real storm still waited, because how Trump responded now would show just how far he would go to claw back control. The ballroom buzzed with energy, reporters murmuring, donors clapping until their rings slid on their fingers, staff rushing to keep up, and at the center of it all, standing firm behind the podium, was Barack Obama. His voice remained steady, carried not by volume but by presence. You know, Obama said softly, both hands resting on the podium, when I was growing up on the south side of Honolulu, we didn't have much. My mother worked hard. My grandparents sacrificed a lot. There were moments when everything felt fragile. If you want, I can continue rewriting the next section in the same style. Having a safe home can change a child's entire world. The line hit deep. Some guests nodded slowly, others leaned back, lost in their own memories of tough years. At Trump's table, he leaned toward Mark Delaney, muttering, he's laying on the sob story. He's always good at that. The media loves it. Delaney didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the stage, drawn in like everyone else by Obama's steady rhythm. Obama continued, pulling the room further under his voice. I met a woman in Dayton, Ohio a couple years back, he said gently. She was working 2 jobs, raising 3 kids, and still couldn't afford rent. Heads turned, expressions growing heavier as he went on. Her oldest daughter told me she studied for exams in a laundromat, because after the eviction, it was the only place with light and heat. A wave of discomfort rolled through the ballroom. She didn't ask me for charity, he said softly, she asked for fairness. She asked for a real chance. The same chance every child deserves. He let the moment breathe. That's what tonight is about. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was thoughtful, reflective. People clapped because they felt the truth of it. At a table in the center, Senator Julia Reinhart leaned toward her husband. He's dissolving the tension without even raising his voice, she whispered. Trump heard it. His jaw tightened as he tapped 2 fingers on the table in a sharp, impatient rhythm. He's hijacking my event, he muttered yet again. Ivanka leaned closer, urgency dripping from her voice. Dad, people are reacting. Don't make this worse. On stage, Obama lifted one hand slightly. I know folks in this room don't all share the same politics, he said. That's okay. That's America. But hunger doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat, homelessness doesn't care who you voted for. The line struck hard, applause broke out again, bigger this time. Several people rose from their seats for a brief standing ovation, even donors who had been hesitant earlier got swept up in the momentum. Obama waited for the noise to settle, then lowered his voice again. I've seen what happens when a child finally has a bed of their own, he said, when a mother doesn't have to hide her fear anymore. When a veteran comes home and finally turns a key in a door that belongs to him. A longtime Republican donor, Douglas Keene, whispered to the woman beside him, I walked in planning to write $100,000 check, now I'm thinking, $500,000. He's changing how I see this. The woman was already jotting down a new pledge. Trump saw the exchange, his face flushed a deep, angry red. He's stealing money from my night, he hissed, those are my donors. Delaney stayed silent, but the silence spoke volumes. Obama straightened his tie, a small gesture signaling his close. So here's the deal, he said, I've made my pledge. And I'm asking each of you to think about what you can do, not for me. Not for politics, for the families who don't have the luxury of a ballroom tonight. The room exploded, applause shook the chandeliers, dozens leapt to their feet, clapping, cheering, even whistling. Cameras flashed like lightning across the ballroom. This wasn't a fundraiser anymore. It was a moment. Linda Ortega stepped back onto the stage, her voice trembling with gratitude. Thank you, Mr. President. That was exactly what tonight needed. Obama gave her a small nod and stepped aside, letting her reclaim the microphone. The applause didn't stop. It followed him as he walked back through the room, stopping occasionally to shake hands, leaving a wake of energy behind him. At the head table, Trump stayed perfectly still. No clapping. No smile, just a rigid stare locked on Obama, the contrast between them sharp as a spotlight point. One man lifted the room. The other simmered in quiet fury, but Trump wasn't done, not even close. If Obama thought the tension had ended with that speech, he was about to learn just how far the president was willing to go to drag the spotlight back. Trump sat frozen, though his body screamed agitation, shoulders stiff, hands pressing hard into the tablecloth, carving creases beneath his fists. Applause for Obama continued to ripple through the ballroom. Donors leaned across tables, excitedly whispering about doubling or tripling their commitments. Staff members darted between chairs, writing down pledges that would shatter every previous record. Obama's speech had ignited the night. Everyone felt it, everyone except Trump. Ivanka leaned in again, almost pleading, Dad, you can still recover this. Smile. Clap, say something gracious. Trump didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Obama, seated several tables away. Talking casually with a small circle of donors, Obama's presence still drew the room's attention. Trump watched from the head table, seething, and hissed under his breath, he embarrassed me in my ballroom, at my event. You really think I'm going to smile after that? Mark Delaney, the security chief, shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't a political strategist, his world was protocols and protection, but even he could see the damage unfolding. Sir, he said cautiously, the optics, they're not good. People are watching you just as much as him. Trump's gaze snapped to Delaney like a whip. I don't care about optics, he growled, I care about control. And right now, he's the one holding it. At a nearby table, Senator Julia Reinhart leaned toward her husband. Look at him, she murmured, he's boiling. He's about to do something reckless. Her husband, Harold Brennan, a gentle, soft-spoken attorney, adjusted his glasses, and every camera in this place is waiting for exactly that, he whispered back. The room's mood had shifted, subtle but unmistakable, and the spotlight on Trump didn't fade, it intensified. He felt it like heat on his skin, stinging his pride. Then, with a sudden, sharp decision, he lifted his glass and struck it hard with his fork. The metallic clang cut through the chatter, freezing part of the crowd. Applause still echoed from across the ballroom, but slowly it faded as people turned to him. Trump stood, tugging his jacket straight, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, what a tremendous night. A wonderful night. Already a huge success. The room quieted politely, but the air stayed uneven, pulling toward Obama no matter how Trump tried to center himself. I want to thank everyone here, he continued, no one appreciates your generosity more than I do. Nobody. He paused, then glanced straight at Obama. Now, we've heard from Barack. Very nice words, very nice, but let me tell you something, you don't fix homelessness with speeches, you fix it with results. A shocked ripple moved through the room, air seemed to tighten around every table. Obama sat still, calm, unflinching, hands folded. His silence made Trump's jab land even harder. Linda Ortega froze near the stage, horrified that she'd wanted unity tonight, one rare evening above politics. Now she could feel it fracturing right beneath her feet. Trump leaned closer to the mic, sharpening his tone. This organization doesn't need politicians swooping in with show-off donations. That IT needs leadership. Strong leadership. That's why I'm here. That's why tonight is such a success. The room went stiff. A few people clapped hesitantly, unsure. Most stayed silent, eyes moving between Trump and Obama like spectators at a slow-motion collision. Then, from the far side of the ballroom, a voice cut through. Douglas Keene, the Republican donor who had just doubled his pledge, spoke loud enough for several tables to hear. With all due respect, Mr. President, his donation pushed me to give more. That's not grandstanding. That's leadership. The words shot across the room like sparks. Whispers followed, nods, murmurs of agreement, even scattered applause. Trump's face darkened. He gripped the microphone so hard the veins in his hand stood out. You're all missing the point, he barked. This is my night. My event, and no one comes in here and steals it from me. The silence that followed was suffocating, not reverent, uncomfortable. Guests shifted in their seats, eyes avoiding the head table. Cameras zoomed in, catching the sheen of sweat on Trump's forehead. Then Obama moved, slowly, deliberately. He stood, turned toward Trump, and spoke in a calm, steady voice. Mr. President, with respect, no one is stealing anything. We're here to raise money for families who need help. That's bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than politics. The words hit like a hammer. Applause erupted, loud, unified, unrestrained. Guests rose to their feet again, faster this time, clapping hard, cheering. The energy swung dramatically back toward Obama. Trump stood frozen at the podium, staring at the man who had dismantled his entire argument with one quiet moment. But the clash wasn't over. The tension still had room to climb. And what happened next would tilt the entire evening. The applause that followed Obama's reply shook the ballroom. People rose. Instantly, as though choosing a side, the spotlight had abandoned Trump entirely. Obama didn't fuel it. He waited, letting the applause crest, then fall. When it dimmed, he raised one hand, and the room fell silent. I don't want this to become a competition, he said. Words matter. Vision matters, but action is what puts a roof over a family's head. The crowd leaned in, sensing something big. That's why tonight, in addition to my earlier pledge, I'll be matching every donation made in this room, up to $5 million. The silence lasted half a heartbeat, then the entire ballroom detonated into noise, gasps, shouts, cheers. 5 million, someone cried. People leapt to their feet, applauding wildly. Phones lit up as donors texted their assistants with new pledge amounts. Linda Ortega clasped her hands to her chest, eyes wide, mouthing, "Oh my God." At the head table, Trump's jaw dropped before snapping closed. His face flushed a deeper red. He crushed the microphone in his grip hard enough that it squeaked. This is ridiculous. He spat under his breath. He's buying the room. Ivanka leaned in, voice sharp and urgent. Dad, stop. Every word you say now only makes him look stronger. Let it go. Trump whipped his head toward her. I don't let go, he growled. I never let go. Back on stage. Obama spoke as if the tension in the room simply wasn't there. I know everyone gives what they can, he said warmly. That's never been the point. What matters is showing families across this country that the people with the ability to help will help. Applause swept through the ballroom again, louder this time. But now people weren't just clapping. Hands went up. Pens came out. Staff hurried from table to table as guests whispered new, much larger numbers. Checks were rewritten. Donation cards filled so quickly that volunteers struggled to keep up. Near the back, a pharmaceutical CEO leaned toward his wife. We planned on donating 200,000, he murmured. Make it $1 million. If he's matching dollar for dollar, we're doubling our impact instantly. She nodded, excitement lighting her face. Do it. This feels like history. Even some of Trump's longtime allies shifted. Charles Vinton, sitting near Senator Julia Reinhardt, lifted his hand for a staffer. Julia raised an eyebrow. I thought you said you were tapped out, she said. Charles gave a quiet shrug. That was before Obama spoke. He reminded me why we're here. Reporters scribbled across their notepads, already knowing what tomorrow's headlines would be. Gala shatters records after surprise speech, energy surges across donor floor. At the podium, Trump tried to reclaim the moment. He raised his voice over the applause. That's very generous, Barack, very generous. But let's remember, this event exists because of my administration's strong policies. The line didn't land. No reaction. No applause, just an uncomfortable stillness. Cameras caught the stiff smile tugging at Trump's mouth, the tightness in his jaw. The contrast was impossible to miss. One man talked about families in need, the other talked about himself. Obama didn't even glance at Trump. Instead, he looked to Linda Ortega. Linda, he asked, how much were you hoping to raise tonight? She swallowed, overwhelmed. Our goal was $5 million. Obama smiled. Well, I think we just passed that. The room erupted, deafening applause bouncing off the chandeliers. Donors shouted new pledges across tables. Numbers climbed higher and higher, as if people were competing to give more. Linda wiped her eyes, almost shaking. This is unbelievable. Trump said nothing now. His expression had hardened, his gaze fixed on the floor as Obama continued. Here's what matters, Obama said softly. History won't remember the amounts. It won't remember who gave what. But it will remember the lives changed because of what you did here tonight. The ballroom exploded once more, applause rolling like thunder, layered with awe, gratitude, and genuine respect. But behind the curtains, away from the lights, small conversations were already beginning, whispers that revealed just how dramatically the night's energy had shifted. The ballroom itself seemed to hum. It wasn't just excitement anymore, it was momentum, that unstoppable, electric kind of momentum that changes minds, and sometimes loyalties. Foundation volunteers rushed faster now, their clipboards filled with triple totals. The evening had transformed from a standard fundraiser into something closer to a political shockwave. Even the waiters noticed. One leaned toward another as he set down a tray of champagne. Man, he walks in and the whole room flips like he owns it. The other waiter shook his head. He doesn't even try to own it. That's why they love him. And at the head table, the real shift was only beginning. Trump sat stiffly, his smile stretched thin and fragile, more like a cracked mask than a gesture of confidence. That he clapped when the room clapped, but even that looked forced, every motion mechanical and reluctant. People noticed, the cameras noticed. Nearby, Charles Vinton scratched a fresh number onto his pledge card. Julia Reinhardt leaned over with a teasing smirk. So much for holding firm, Charles. He shrugged, sheepish. What can I say? The man makes it feel like it's about more than writing a check. Julia nodded. That's not persuasion, it's conviction. There's a difference. Across the ballroom, Douglas Keene, the donor who had openly challenged Trump earlier, was now surrounded by guests congratulating him. A Politico reporter hovered behind them, scribbling non-stop. Meanwhile, Obama stayed at his table, not soaking in praise but simply talking with people. He shared a quiet laugh with young volunteers, shook hands with a pastor from Indianapolis, and leaned in to listen to a single mother explain her story. He looked less like a political rival and more like someone blending naturally into a community. Julia nudged her husband Harold. Look at him. He doesn't even try to take control, and somehow he's still the center of the room. Harold adjusted his glasses. That's the issue for Trump. You can't yell louder than that kind of presence. At the head table, Trump's team tried desperately to keep him from reacting. Ivanka leaned in, whispering urgently, Dad, the more you respond, the worse it gets. Let it go. Trump growled under his breath, it doesn't go away while the cameras are pointed here. And they were. Every lens in the room tracked both men, some capturing Obama's easy interactions, others lingering on Trump's tightening expression. On social media feeds and live streams, the contrasting shots appeared side by side. A Fox News correspondent whispered to his cameraman, this clip will be everywhere by morning. As the night stretched on, the split only widened. Donors who had arrived hoping to impress Trump were now gravitating toward Obama, not because he asked, but but because he reminded them why they'd shown up in the first place. Near the stage, Linda Ortega leaned against a marble pillar, her phone buzzing non-stop. One text read, "This might be the biggest fundraiser in the foundation's history. Your front page news." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. She hadn't expected Obama's appearance, it wasn't even part of the plan. But she realized now it had rescued the evening from political collapse. Across the room, murmurs spread like sparks. A defense contractor whispered, "I don't usually give to causes like this, but if Obama's matching, put me down for $2 million. A Hollywood producer waved over his assistant, "Call accounting. Double the number, before this speech hits the news cycle." Fragments of these conversations drifted to Trump, each one hit harder than the last. That he scanned the ballroom, searching for loyalty, but what he saw wasn't affection, it was disinterest. People weren't opposing him, they were simply moving past him. He leaned toward Mark Delaney, tight-voiced, "This is out of control. We need to take the spotlight back." Delaney kept his eyes forward. "Sir, the spotlight isn't coming back tonight. Not the way you want it to." Trump shot him a furious look, but deep down he knew Delaney was right. Across the room, Obama leaned back casually, hands folded. That he wasn't boasting, that he wasn't performing, but the optics said everything. One man calm and composed, the other simmering with frustration. The donors noticed, the journalists noticed, even the servers weaving between tables could feel it. Tonight belonged to Obama. No matter how loudly Trump tried to reclaim it, but the real story wasn't unfolding in the ballroom, it was happening just outside its doors. Quiet conversations in corners and hallways, where loyalties and reputations were quietly repositioning themselves. The ballroom buzzed with applause and chatter, but outside the heavy double doors, the mood shifted to something sharper, almost secretive. Staff, reporters, and high-profile donors drifted in and out, carrying champagne, and whispers. In a hallway near the catering kitchen, Julia Reinhardt stood with Douglas Keene and two reporters scribbling notes. Julia crossed her arms. You could feel it. The donors weren't just giving, they were shifting. Douglas adjusted his cufflinks. "I've given to Republican candidates for 25 years. But tonight wasn't about parties." His speech reminded me what real leadership looks like. It's not shouting, it's elevating the cause. A journalist raised a brow. "So you'd consider backing him publicly?" Douglas smirked. "I'm not saying it out loud, not yet. But plenty of people in that room are thinking it." Backstage, near the stage entrance, Linda Ortega paced with her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, Senator," she said breathlessly. "I'm telling you," Linda said breathlessly into the phone, "we've blown past the goal. Obama showing up completely flipped the room. Pledges are hitting us faster than we can process them." She froze, eyes widening. "No, I didn't invite him," she whispered. "He called this morning and said he wanted to support quietly. I had no idea it would ignite like this." She hung up and leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. For months she'd worried the gala would collapse under political tension. Now she saw the truth. The night wouldn't be remembered for the feud, but for what it accomplished. A few steps down the hallway, two young aides clutched notepads, whispering in frantic excitement. "Did you see how Trump snapped into the mic? That clip will be everywhere by sunrise," the other whispered. "But it's Obama's line, bigger than you, bigger than me, that's the headline. It's already blowing up." They were right. In a small press room beside the ballroom, monitors flickered with live coverage, split screens showing Trump, tense and flushed at the podium, and Obama, calm and smiling from his seat. The images spoke for themselves. Back inside, the buzz wasn't just about dollar amounts anymore, it was about optics. Harold Brennan leaned toward Julia and murmured, "This stopped being a fundraiser 20 minutes ago. It's a narrative shift. People are going to remember who unraveled, and who didn't." Julia nodded. "And they'll remember who pulled in $10 million. Trump's allies knew exactly how it looked. Across the room, two Republican operatives were deep in panic. "This is catastrophic," one muttered. "He's coming off as small. Obama looks like the adult in the room." The other grimaced. "We need a spin. Say Obama staged it, make it sound like a setup." "Good luck," the first scoffed. "You can't spin what people watched happen live." Meanwhile backstage, Obama sat quietly, sipping water from a plain glass as Linda briefed him, "Barack, do you understand what just happened? We've never reached 7 million. We're sitting at 10, and still climbing." Obama shook his head gently. "That's not me, Linda. That's everyone out there choosing to believe their contribution matters." She studied him, her voice soft. "You reminded them why they came." He didn't answer right away. Instead he glanced toward the ballroom doors where applause still thundered through. "I just wanted to bring the focus back," he said finally. "People forget sometimes." Across the hall, Trump leaned in close to his aides, voice sharp and low, "This can't continue. We need to shut him down before this is tomorrow's headline." But Ivanka cut him off, her voice cold, "Dad, it is tomorrow's headline. The question is how much worse you want it to look." Trump shot her a furious look, but stayed silent. Near the exit, a cluster of donors whispered among themselves, "Let's be honest," one said plainly. Obama took the night. Fair and square. "And thank God someone did," another replied. This was supposed to be about the cause. They weren't afraid to say it anymore. Everyone could feel the shift, but the night's biggest moment was still ahead, the final tally that would define the gala forever. As midnight inched closer, no one budged from their seats. Champagne glasses sat untouched, sweat trickling down their sides. The air buzzed with that electric tension people feel when they're about to witness something historic. Volunteers rushed back and forth, calculators clicking non-stop, scribbling totals faster than they could read them out loud. At the stage, Linda stood frozen for a moment, gripping a sheet of paper that trembled slightly in her hands. She had gotten updates all evening, but nothing prepared her for this final figure. Her board members stood close, exhausted and stunned. Anthony Calder, silver-haired and wide-eyed, leaned in. "Linda, this number is going to be in every newspaper tomorrow morning." Taking a shaky breath, she stepped forward and lifted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, stopping as the crowd quieted to a hush, "I don't even know how to express what you've done tonight. You haven't just met expectations, you've rewritten them." A wave of applause rippled across the room. The room fell silent again, all eyes shifting back to Linda. She stared down at the paper in her trembling hands, then lifted her gaze, emotion pooling at the corners of her eyes. "Our goal tonight was $5 million, she said softly. "But as of this moment, the total raised is 15.6 million. The reaction was instant, an explosion. Chairs scraped back, people sprang to their feet, applause cracked like thunder across the ballroom. Whistles cut through the air. Guests hugged across tables, some banging their rings against glasses as they clapped. It was pure, unrestrained celebration. In the press area, reporters lunged for phones. 15.6. Yes, 15.6. Cameramen zoomed in so fast their lenses trembled, caught up in the same excitement. Obama didn't stand, didn't wave, didn't even look surprised. He just leaned back, hands folded loosely in his lap, a quiet smile resting on his face, as if this outcome had always been expected. He turned to the woman beside him, a small-town pastor who had pledged her congregation's entire annual fund. "Looks like you're part of something big tonight," he murmured. She nodded, eyes shimmering. "Bigger than I ever imagined." Across the room, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. Trump sat frozen, his face drained beneath the warm lights. His eyes darted nervously as applause shook the chandeliers. His fingers dug into the table edge until his knuckles blanched. Mark Delaney leaned in carefully. "Sir, it's over. There's no angle to twist. Tomorrow's headlines are going to say Obama, don't tell me what I need to do," Trump growled, cutting him off, the words sharp enough to slice. Ivanka tried again, gently but firmly. "Dad, if you stand now, congratulate the donors, thank the room, you can still be part of this moment. You don't have to fight it. Just share it." But his jaw locked tighter. His eyes never left Obama, who was still speaking calmly with donors as if he weren't the center of the night's triumph. Linda Ortega lifted her hands, trying to settle the uproar. "This is the most successful night our foundation has ever had," she said, her voice shaking. "Because of you, more families will find stability, safety, and hope than ever before." The ballroom roared again. A chant rose from the back, 15-6. 15-6. It swept across the room like a wave until everyone was calling it out in unison. At last, Obama rose. He raised a single hand, no grand gesture, no victory pose, just quiet acknowledgement. The crowd leaned in, wanting to catch every word. "This isn't about me," he said calmly. "It's about families who'll sleep under roofs instead of open skies tonight. That is your victory. That is your legacy." Another eruption. Applause rolled through the hall like rolling thunder. Trump snapped that he shoved back from his chair, the legs screeching across the floor, and stormed out. Cameras whipped toward him, flashes bursting like lightning. "Mr. President." "Any comment?" Reporters shouted that he didn't answer, just shoved through the doors and vanished, the roar of applause for Obama echoing down the hallway behind him. No one followed. No one paused the celebration. It was as though he'd slipped out of the story completely. Linda returned to the mic, her voice breaking. "I'll remember this night forever, and I know all of you will too." She turned to Obama. "Thank you." He nodded gently, the same steady expression never leaving his face. The record was set. The money was raised. Nothing Trump said afterward could undo the images already burned into the public's mind, the composure, the crowd's reaction, the $15.6 million that would change lives. Yet the true weight of the night wasn't the number. It was the demonstration of grace under pressure, a lesson already settling in the minds of everyone present. When the ballroom finally thinned out and the last glasses were cleared, journalists were already hunched over laptops in the hotel lobby, writing headlines that would flood the morning news. "Obama turns Trump's gala into record-breaking night, $15.6 million raised." Trump exits amid cheers for Obama. But for those who had been in that room, the memory ran deeper than headlines. They'd watched two leaders react to the same moment in completely opposite ways. One clung to anger, to control, to the microphone. The other centered the families who would benefit, steady, calm, unshaken. Backstage, Julia Reinhart leaned against the wall beside Douglas Keane, releasing a long breath. "I came here expecting drama," she whispered. "I didn't expect to leave thinking about who I want to be when pressure hits." Douglas nodded. "That's the difference." Everyone saw the same storm, but only one man kept his balance. And people noticed that. They remember it. Later, Linda finally sat down, exhausted, as her phone buzzed non-stop with messages and interview requests. But her thoughts drifted to a shelter she'd visited days earlier, to a boy whose entire life fit inside a worn backpack. Tonight's money meant he'd have a bed soon. That was the moment she wanted to hold on to. Obama paused beside her, shaking her hand one more time. "You did something remarkable tonight," he said. She shook her head. "No, Mr. President, you did." He smiled gently. "All I did was remind people why they were here. You gave them the chance to act." As he exited with a small cluster of staff, the crowd parted naturally. Hands reached out, applause followed him, not because he demanded it, but because the room wanted to give it. Trump never came back upstairs. He paced his private suite, fuming while aides tried to convince him to release a statement. He waved them off, muttering about betrayal, stolen attention, loyalty. Meanwhile, clips of him storming out would run non-stop for days, each replay further undermining the image he wanted to project. The gala ended with laughter, hugs, and an unmistakable feeling that something meaningful had happened. Something beyond politics. By morning, newspapers nationwide carried the same story. But beneath the headlines lived a quieter message. Character had spoken louder than volume. 2 Leaders. 1 Choosing chaos. 1 Choosing calm. The contrast wasn't subtle, it was unavoidable, and that's the lesson the night left behind. True leadership isn't about shouting the loudest or holding the spotlight. It's about dignity, steadiness, purpose. It's about lifting others even when tensions rise. Obama didn't set out to own the night. But by focusing on the people who'd benefit rather than himself, he showed that real strength doesn't demand attention, it earns respect, and maybe that's what's worth remembering in a world where outrage gets more airtime than compassion. Grace still matters, because when egos clash and the room splits, the one who chooses calm over chaos wins more than applause. They win trust, they win respect, and in the end, that's worth more than any headline.